Hi, welcome to the coaching game. I'm Laurie Lawson, and tonight my guest is Doug DiBrielle. Hey, Doug.
Hi, Lori. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I feel like I found Doug. I'm sure he's been around long before I found him, but Doug is a licensed mental health counselor. But I kind of found him in the coaching world, and it was like, what are you doing here? It's like, cool, you have all these qualifications, and he's worked all these places. And it was like, wow, what's he doing in the coaching world? So we started talking. I went, ah, I get it. So, Doug, tell us. What are you doing in the coaching world? How did you get here?
One word answer, curiosity. And that just came to me as you asked the question.
Mm.
Uh, I have this profound curiosity to understand humans and both the ways that we're different and the ways that we're alike and everywhere on that spectrum in between. It's just so fascinating to me, each and every one of us. So that's how I ended up coaching, because I'm also interested in how we get from, let's say, dysfunction to function to thrive, because I believe we all should get a chance to thrive.
Well, I love his email. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to reveal it. It's Doug at Thrive Catalyst. I'm going, okay, now what is that? I mean, so curiosity, you're right. That's you. But everything about you makes me want to go, what? What about you? What are you doing? So fantastic. So I know that you've successfully worked in the mental health field, and I know you've got a degree in nonprofit management and all kinds of things. What was your thought about coaching? What were you going to do with that? What are you
Yeah,
going to do with that?
absolutely. Lori, uh, the thing I'm going to start with is sort of where I started professionally, and I started as a commercial pilot.
Okay, again, more questions, yes.
and 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 I realized, oh gosh, I am not in the right lane in life. And um, as I began to explore what am I going to do with my life, because this thing that I'm doing of sure it's flying planes, it's fun, but it wasn't really getting me scratching my itch in life. And I began to explore coaching as an option. And I really loved when I was teaching flying, watching students overcome some legitimate fears.
Yeah.
Like, we lost our one engine. What do we do now? And I'm like, oh, this is a great learning opportunity and a great way to confront
Yeah.
some of our biggest challenges. My students thought I was crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so I met with a number of coaches, and I thought, I could really leverage these teaching skills and help folks grow. And as I got further and further along into exploring the coaching industry, I decided, I really want to understand psychology and what is the line between what our medical world calls wellness and illness or dis-ease. And and so I started at the beginning, and I decided to start learning about psychology, and I went to grad school for it. And then in a similar spirit, as I left grad school, I decided, hmm, I still want to really get the meat and potatoes of understanding, like, what is it that we call dysfunction in this world? And we do actually call it dysfunction because we slap labels on it, and our medical industry has criterion, and it's very structured. Yet some people don't think that they're dysfunctional. So I started working with the homeless community in Boston. And as I was working in that community, I started to realize that there are some folks that really struggle in the condition, understandably so. It's very hard to be without home. And I also found a number of folks who found living in the community of unhoused individuals to be their home. And it really started to open my eyes on the ways that we can have judgments and perspectives about others, and the way that we can choose what works for us, just throwing all the judgments that the world wants to put on our backs out the window. And as I progressed in that field, it led me to specialize in understanding trauma and how that rewires the brain, And still feeling unsatisfied after several years working in the homeless community, I ended up deciding to start a family, needing to start a private practice for flexibility, and began working with another end of a spectrum, and that would be executives and leaders struggling with mental health conditions. And what I began to notice between these two communities was a thread of similarity, that when our nervous system gets fucked up, forgive my language here, but that's really what happens. It just gets all jumbled up when we experience intense fear about anything. And I suddenly started to realize, wow, there is so much of a connection between the unhoused individuals that I was working with and some of the executives I was working with to help them combat stress, anxiety, worry, fatigue, burnout. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, because I wasn't expecting it. And then I began to really get curious to see how far I could help individuals heal to get to a place of functional, so that, let's say, in the diagnostic sense, they're not meeting a certain level of a threshold level of criterion that says, here, you have a mental, congratulations, you check these boxes, you have a mental illness.
You win.
And yeah, right, exactly. Clearly, I tend to be a little irreverent towards the element of medical labels. Nonetheless, once folks became functional in their lives, I realized I needed to develop another skill set, and that's to help them, once they're able to function without support, life has shifted, it's changed, they've healed some of the internal barriers holding them back. I began to wonder, well, how do we help them move forward? Because nobody just wants to be, well, some people are okay with adequate, and some people are not okay with adequate, and they really just want to go for it. And that's where coaching comes in, to take someone from that place of things are fine right now to a place of I'm living my best life. And I believe that we all probably could use a support to help us get there, because we can't see the things that are sometimes standing in our way, but they're right there, and others can help us tune into that. So that's how I got to coaching. Sort of a long answer.
Which brings up so many questions. It's interesting because I just saw a play off Broadway about homelessness, and I think it was really geared toward like migrants, but it was like, and they were asking, what is home to you? And it's like, where I can lay my head down and feel safe. And it may not be the mansion, or it may not be the little shack by the creek. We have to, and I love that. I think you've done that. We have to give room for everybody's interpretation of that. So I admire your courage in doing that. I'm so curious, how on earth do you get executives as your client who say, hey, I'm mentally ill. Can you help me? I just don't see that happening. How does that happen?
In private is how it happens.
Okay.
And I'll say it that way because, well, I'll use an example. A male client reached out to me a number of years ago. And what he said to me was, I've tried everything, and I think I need some help right now because clearly I can't do this on my own. And it was about the time that Anthony Bourdain, if you recall, he sadly took his life. And the client said to me, I don't want to become another Anthony Bourdain, and I fear I'm headed in that direction because I can't handle this and I don't know how to. And that's really someone this individual was at the top of his game, from the outside looking in. On the inside, he was broken. And over the course of about 3 years, we helped him understand what beliefs, what behaviors, what learnings, what expectations were leading him to the brink of broken. Well, recognizing that he wasn't broken at all, he was just taken on more than he could reasonably take on, and also doing things that were so far out of alignment with his values and beliefs.
Ah,
I think we're all vulnerable to that idea that when, well, the world around us imposes so much on us, it's easy for us to say, well, I'm not doing what I should be doing. Says who, right? And in this case, he was saying, I'm not doing what I should be doing. And I was saying, says who? Says the employer's powers that be. And I think my response was, fuck them.
and how long did it take you to convince him that this was the right strategy?
Yeah, it took a few years. And once he began to realize that he could essentially make choices and decisions that were more in line with what he needed to feel complete, what he needed to feel accomplished, the type of work he needed to be doing, the way he needed to be doing it. Once he figured out some of these key elements of functioning, well, also, of course, the mental health side of things is helping individuals learn how to cope with, manage the symptoms of chronic stress, of early childhood trauma. Trauma is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days, and it it's like a pack of crayons. There are many different shades of it,
Mm.
and they're all impactful in different ways. Some in large ways, some in small ways, and this individual was also reckoning with, and most executives that come to me are reckoning with their crappy childhoods, living in a family that was overburdening them with expectation. I work with a lot of men. I tend to be fairly candid and irreverent, and I try to make room for silly and joy in our conversations, even though we're discussing some heavy stuff. Most of them come in with some childhood stuff that isn't resolved, and they don't even know that they were they didn't receive enough of the necessary inputs to become a whole human being or a whole man in a culture that takes masculinity and tries to fit it in this tight little container. And like, yeah, men are so much more and can be, and as are all humans, right? In this case, this individual, once he began to learn some coping skills and realize what worked for him, he surprised me one day and he said, I just gave my 1 week notice and I'm leaving my job. I'm moving to another state with my wife, and he just did something radically different, and it blew my mind. And today he's someone who is truly thriving. And occasionally, I'll check in, and it'll be very much more geared towards a coaching call, like where he's like, how can I be mindful of and pay attention to the things that I might not be noticing right now? And that's some of the flavor of the coaching that we continue to do as he is really living his best life. So it's kind of an exciting and I'd say a privilege for me to watch that journey play out,
Yeah.
to be by someone's side. So yeah, I'm feeling it as we're talking about it. It's so powerful to watch people change, and
Um,
ultimately
definitely.
their neurons are changing. So we're doing some rewiring of the brain as we
Yeah.
help folks move forward.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's once you've had an experience where a client has had an aha moment, it's like, oh, I really love being a coach. Yeah. So, but I have a question because you mentioned labels in the medical field and you
Yeah,
even labels in gender and all of that. But labels in the medical field that's a tight wall and it's like so many rules and regulations. And I'm just wondering, how do you come up against those walls and are you blurring the lines between coaching and medical assistance, and how do you do that?
that is such an important question. So within the bounds of my clinical work, it has to stay clinical. And one of the clinical techniques, if you will, or modalities is using coaching in the clinical setting. So as a clinician, Currently, I'm licensed in Massachusetts, working on a license in California. And I work with folks in the state that they're physically in. And right now, that can only be Massachusetts. And it has to stay in the clinical realm if we start out clinically, because otherwise it is blurring a line if we just jump into, if we all of a sudden say, well, let's just call this coaching now. That doesn't work. So folks that I work with that are just coaching clients, there's a level of clarity around their ability to function that doesn't meet any clinical threshold, if that makes sense. And what I mean by clinical threshold is the coaching clients I have that are strictly executive leadership coaching clients. These are individuals that are not presenting with any significant symptoms. There's no significant disruption in their functioning, whether at work or in any other realm of their life. And they're quite able to manage, and they just want to manage better. And that's a really appropriate room for coaching. And if folks are not able to manage on their own, and I see the clinical symptoms coming up, let's say they're in a different state, that's where I try and connect that individual to clinical services in that state. And not everybody wants to hear that. So I offer some support in recognizing that it's the choice is theirs, of course. But I don't know if that answers your question.
It does in a sense, but I'm still curious when and where. I mean, I know you're probably a marvelous clinician, because my thought is if you take coach training, you got to be better at whatever you're doing. But how do you interject or introduce or use coaching in that sense?
Yeah. In which sense? In the clinical sense?
Yeah. Let me change it. Let me specify. Do you use coaching in the clinical sense? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I'll give another example, because I think
Okay.
examples really bring it to light.
Yeah.
In working with a young gentleman in his 20s, on the path to professional career, working towards getting into graduate school, this individual came in struggling with significant lack of self-worth, significant anxieties, significant fears, and we really focused on working on those in a therapeutic sense. And over a couple years, maybe 2 years, as this individual began to manage their anxieties, their fears, find ways of reducing stress on their own, some self-care routines, this individual eventually got into graduate school. And as they were on the path to explore graduate schools, that's where some coaching came in around what do you want? And it's sort of the coaching gets interjected in allowing that person to tap into their inner wisdom, versus me as clinician saying, can I help you with guidance here? And the coaching techniques are woven in as a way to bring forward the essence of that person, where they are empowered to be making the choices. Because at the end of the day, I believe that each person we all have the answers inside ourselves. If we learn, and when we learn how to listen deeply to what is going on, both the conscious narratives, but also the narratives that aren't conscious to us yet. So I ask folks questions that help them tap into that next level of awareness. And this individual ended up leaving their professional role, getting into graduate school, and just taking off like a rocket ship as they found the lane that they really wanted to be in life. And it's so that's the way I weave in the coaching questions much closer towards the end of the therapeutic work, when individuals have gained capacity to be self-led.
Interesting. I think we could call you the resignation king. It's like, oh, I'll help you get rid of your employees. No problem.
Maybe that should be a disclaimer.
There
Like
could
the
be. No,
disclaimer
I
might
don't know.
be,
I think it's an
work with
asset.
Doug, leave your job.
one of my first clients was having a problem with her relationship, and so we did some coaching, and she called me up later and said, "We're getting a divorce." And I went, "Oh my God, what have I done?" But you know what? It's for the best. I'm sure that people are making their own decision. So what I'm thinking, and I'll just ask you straight out, the few brave medical people that I know that have decided, oh, I want to be a coach, have done it with the intention of changing the medical profession. I don't hear that with you. I hear enhancing the medical profession. Am I right?
Wow, I've never. Thank you for helping me see something I wasn't seeing.
Oh, good. Okay.
uh, I have a deep respect for the medical institutions in this country, and at the same time, it's a both and. We have a long way to go to increase the health of our systems in terms of medical systems. And I believe we need to work within what we have. So yeah, an augmentation of sorts, augmenting what's available to us in the medical systems is something I support everyone should do. And that would be essentially, well, I'm going to back up a little bit.
Mhm.
At the root of my my focus when I work with folks is encouraging each individual to be as self-led as they can be in this world.
Mm.
What I mean by self-led is total reliance on what that individual has on the inside. And there are so many of us that just sort of look to, let's say, the medical institutions to tell us what's wrong with us. And I really flip it and like to help folks recognize, well, let's work with what you got. Like, what's right with you?
Wow.
Because I guarantee there isn't a pill to fix the problem you believe you have.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, how revolutionary. I love it.
Well, it, I thank you. In my mind, I'm like, it clicked a number of years ago, and I was like, oh yeah, what do I self-reveal here? Like, what do I have? That's good? What do I have that's working? Um, and it's been a long road, and I feel very fortunate to be stepping into what I have to bring to this world, and that is truly liberating. And it's a gift that I would hope others get a chance to experience as well. And if we're all, this is a little Pollyanna perhaps, but if we're all tapping into that thing that we love to do, that we're really good at, that the world needs, that we can make money at, what an amazing place this would be. And that, by the way, is the description of the ikigai, a Japanese concept that I'm borrowing.
Well, it's something good. It's a goal for sure. And it's a
Right?
lovely goal.
Hashtag life goals.
Yes, let's do it. Well, having climbed the corporate ladder, and now here I am, not in the corporate world, I am a firm believer that most people at the top need some coaching. Why did you choose executives?
I love that question. In my experience of leading teams in aviation, in the nonprofit world, in my observations of family members leading teams, it can be such a high pressure and lonely place where it's easy for the outside world to demand more of the human than is possible. And if those of us that are trying to lead, don't learn how to manage that expectation, we will get crushed. And at the same time, I have a very candid agenda, if you will. I think agenda is a strong word, but so many of our leaders deserve support to be who they truly are. Because when our leaders of systems and groups and teams are able to understand how liberating it is to be authentic, to be actually care about people, that stepping back to bring others forward is exponentially more productive when it comes to an organizational system. So when leaders get a chance to entertain that experience and idea, the systems change. So interestingly enough, my undergraduate studies were in environmental sciences. My path has been all over the road.
Yes.
and I focus on leaders because they, in many ways, have a lever to influence the system, a very large level to influence the system, and it's very much an ecosystems approach I take to working with a leader and helping them understand what the impact of their decisions, choices, behaviors might be on others. And then we question whether or not that's in the interest of productivity, profits, and it always is in the interest of doing better as an organization when we essentially develop. And so that's where human development, the psychology of human development fits in. And I love to use that with leaders to help them understand, where do they need to develop a little bit? Where are they still acting like a 13-year-old?
Yeah. Not only leaders, of course, all of us, but still.
Well, yeah, I mean, and my definition of leadership is very simple. It's an interaction where influence occurs. So we are all leaders. We can all create and generate influence. It just so happens that the executives tend to have the title, the power in our world, and that's kind of, it just is what it is. So I find it incredibly rewarding to help them open their eyes and be like, oh wow, I didn't realize I was such an asshole.
Well, thank heavens you're out there. Now we have a minute left, believe it or
Sure.
not. Let me ask you a quick question. Are you taking individual clients, or you just work?
I do. At the moment, I take individual clients, and because it's a very intimate process. The coaching process is still a very intimate process, and it's one that I take as sacred.
Well,
So
tell them your how they can get in touch with you, and
sure,
we're gonna
sure.
sign off because we're
Yeah.
out of
So
time.
you can reach me. My website's thrivecatalyst.com, and I'm Doug at thrivecatalyst.com. And you can send me an email. Check out my website, and I'd love to have you reach out, and we can journey together.
Oh, I love that. The journey. Doug DiBrielle, lovely having you on. I knew we had a wealth of information. I have 100 more questions. Maybe I'll have you on again so we can answer those. But thank you so much for being a part of the coaching game. And let's keep talking.
Absolutely. The pleasure was mine. Thank you so much, Laurie. Be well.
Sure. Thank you.